Dark clouds gathered over the Rutherford estate as guests arrived for what was poised to be the season's most glamorous engagement dinner. Whispers of old family secrets drifted among the candlelit tables, while fresh flowers perfumed the warm night air. Billionaire Ambrose Rutherford, heir to a centuries-old fortune, stood at the threshold, ready to introduce his fiancée to the world. But in the bustling kitchen, there was someone who never expected to set foot on Rutherford soil again. Her heart raced as servers carried out trays of gourmet hors d'oeuvres, for beyond the sizzling pans and decorative platters lay a secret: she was his ex-wife, and she wasn't alone. Ambrose Rutherford had always been a symbol of prestige in the eastern corridors of high society. Born into a lineage that traced back to British nobility, he lived in a sprawling estate perched on the outskirts of New York City. The Rutherford name was attached to philanthropy, galas, exclusive fundraisers, and investments that shaped entire industries. The staff in his home were as loyal to him as they had been to his parents and grandparents before him. Even the driver who picked up Ambrose from the airport whenever he flew in from global business trips had known him since childhood. This evening, Ambrose wore a crisp midnight blue suit tailored in London, his cufflinks gleaming under the chandelier's warm glow. Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating a new chapter. After years of heartbreak and caution around romance, he was finally engaged to a woman named Juliana Carlisle, a charming socialite with a keen sense for public relations and a family name that commanded respect. Their engagement had set gossip columns alight, each speculating how quickly Ambrose had moved on from a private past. What no one realized, perhaps not even Juliana, was how deeply Ambrose's wounds still ran. Though the official story was that he had divorced a woman named Genevieve Leclerc years ago, few knew the circumstances of their union or their separation. Ambrose had locked those memories away, sealing them behind success, philanthropy, and relentless work. He had buried himself in new acquisitions, real estate ventures, and invitations to private events. His ex-wife had become something of a phantom in society gossip. Some doubted she had ever existed at all. Inside the grand hall, tall vases of burgundy roses adorned the tables. White-gloved servers wove through the crowd, discreetly offering flutes of champagne. A violin quartet played softly near the fireplace, setting a tone that was both elegant and intimate. Ambrose offered polite smiles to old acquaintances, the Van Pelts, the Whitmores, the Carlisle clan. His soon-to-be in-laws flitted about greeting guests and accepting congratulations. Yet a subtle tension crackled in the air, as if something momentous was about to happen. From the adjoining kitchen came the sound of pans clanging and frenzied chatter among the catering staff. In that realm of heat and swirling aromas, the head caterer lifted her chin confidently. She had insisted on personally supervising this event, though the truth was, she had dreaded it from the moment she recognized the client's name. Genevieve Leclerc, once Genevieve Leclerc. Rutherford never dreamed she would be back at the estate where she had once dared to believe in a forever love. Yet there she was, wearing a spotless white chef's coat embroidered with the name of the catering company she had launched on her own. The irony was almost too bitter to swallow. As she meticulously arranged sauce drizzles and garnishes on porcelain plates, her hands trembled. For nearly 6 years, she had hidden away from the Rutherford name, determined to raise her secret in anonymity. Tonight, fate had other plans. Genevieve's mind spun back to the very first day she had stepped into Rutherford Manor years ago as a wide-eyed culinary student. She had been accepted into an exclusive cooking internship, and the Rutherfords had hosted a lavish party. Ambrose had been a mere acquaintance at the time, the handsome heir who kept to himself. It was during the post-event cleanup, when Genevieve accidentally stumbled and spilled a tray of baked desserts that she first found herself face to face with him. Instead of chastising her, he knelt beside her on the marble floor, helping to clean the mess. He had been gentle, concerned, quietly laughing at the absurdity of the situation. That day he asked for her name, and Genevieve had felt an electric rush course through her veins. Now, years later, the memory weighed heavily upon her heart. Every corner of the grand estate reminded her of some moment with him dancing under the gazebo at midnight, chasing each other through the manicured gardens during a sudden storm, laughing as they tried to whip up a homemade dessert in the giant kitchen after hours. The estate had once been a place of love and warmth, but after their messy divorce, it became a place she vowed never to return. Genevieve paused, taking a deep breath. The hustle of her staff reminded her that she had a job to do. She was here on a professional contract, nothing more. Her arms were strong from years of kneading dough and hauling crates of produce, her eyes determined from a life spent forging her own path. If Ambrose recognized her, and he would if he saw her, she would confront it head-on. Or she might do her best to remain hidden in the chaos, letting the waiters handle the final presentations in the dining hall. Her heart battered her chest as she heard one of the servers mention Mr. Rutherford's fiancée. The word had an icy sting. Once she had been that fiancée. Once she had been the woman who believed she would share a lifetime with him. Now she was just the caterer. But she had something else up her sleeve. 3 somethings to be exact. 3 small hearts that reminded her every day of the man she had once married. Their triplets, 2 boys and a girl, awaited her in a safe, discreet home miles away. She had not told Ambrose about them, convinced that he had made his choice to be free of her. And if he wanted no part of her, surely he wanted no part of them. She had built a life for those children, Darian, Lila, and Marcus, that steered them away from the swirling complications of high society. Yet a part of her always wondered in those quiet moments at night if she should have told him. Juliana Carlisle had already begun to sense that something was off about her husband-to-be that evening. She had been introduced to many of Ambrose's old family friends, and though he performed the role impeccably, smiling at all the right times, ensuring she was never left alone in the crowd, she felt an undercurrent of tension. His jaw clenched whenever the discussion strayed toward the catering arrangements. It was subtle, but years of navigating high society engagements had taught Juliana how to read the slightest shift in posture or intonation. Rumor had reached her ears that there was a unique caterer on board tonight, someone rumored to have ties to the Rutherford family. Curiosity gnawed at her, but she knew better than to pry in front of an audience. Instead, she maintained her own impeccable composure, perfectly coiffed hair, and an elegant gown that whispered class with every step. She accepted compliments about the decor, draped in gold and deep burgundy, the Rutherford family colors expressing gratitude for the staff's extraordinary efforts. Yet an unease haunted her. She had never fully grasped the details of Ambrose's divorce. It was a topic he masterfully evaded. There was talk of an impulsive, short-lived marriage. Some whispered that he had married beneath him a woman of no particular social standing. Others spun wild speculation that she was a foreign heiress, that she had run off with a portion of his fortune, or that she had vanished. None of the stories matched up. Juliana had chosen not to pressure him. After all, their relationship had blossomed quickly, and it was fueled by a mutual desire for partnership, hers for a stable, upstanding partner who could support her philanthropic pursuits, and his for a well-connected woman who would strengthen his social standing even further. She surveyed the room, noticing a door at the far end, leading to the kitchen corridor. She had explored every inch of the Rutherford estate, But that corridor always held a magnetic pull. She knew it led to places not typically shown on tours. On an impulse, she slipped away from the chatter heading toward it. Something compelled her to see what was behind the scenes of this meticulously orchestrated event. Genevieve's footsteps echoed on the gleaming tiles as she slipped out of the kitchen to direct a server who was lost in the labyrinth of hallways. She was dressed in a neat uniform, her hair pinned back, though a few rebellious strands framed her face. At that moment, she nearly collided with Juliana Carlisle, who looked equally startled. The two women froze in place, eyes locking in mutual surprise. Juliana took in the figure before her, noticing the quiet self-confidence in her stance. "I'm sorry," Juliana said, regaining her composure. "I was just looking around. You must be part of the catering team. Everything is lovely so far." Genevieve forced a polite smile. "Thank you. We're doing our best to make it a memorable evening." Something about Genevieve's voice caught Juliana's attention. It was gentle, yet resonant with emotion. She detected a sadness behind those calm eyes, a tinge of pain that spoke volumes, but she brushed it off. There was no reason to suspect anything amiss. "I'm Juliana, by the way," she offered. Genevieve nodded. "Genevieve?" she replied, pausing before adding, "It's a pleasure to meet you." She quickly corrected herself. "I should get back. There's a lot to oversee tonight." She turned to leave, but Juliana found herself calling out, "Thank you again for your hard work." When Genevieve disappeared around the corner, Juliana couldn't shake the sense that something was swirling in the air. She found herself wondering why the woman's name rang a distant bell. But with so many invitations and staff, she let it pass for the moment. Genevieve pressed a hand to her chest as she returned to the kitchen, adrenaline pounding in her veins. She had come face to face with the woman who would soon be Ambrose's wife. A flood of conflicting emotions overtook her. It felt surreal, like the dream colliding with reality. This was the woman who would soon wear Ambrose's ring, who would be introduced to the world as Mrs. Rutherford. And all Genevieve could think about was the children at home, the ones she had never shared with him. Back in the main hall, Ambrose felt an unsettling tingle ripple up his spine. He surveyed the room, seeing only well-dressed socialites and waiters. But something was off. A strange hush had settled, as though the very air carried echoes of the past. For a fleeting moment he recalled the day Genevieve had left him. They had been in the estate's sunroom sunlight filtering through the glass, illuminating the heartbreak etched on her face. All their arguments about money, about his family's demands, about her feeling stifled in this life she never asked for, it had all erupted in one final confrontation. He remembered the tears in her eyes as she turned away. "This isn't the life I wanted," she had whispered. He reached out, but she pulled free. 2 days later, she was gone. Their marriage undone in what felt like the blink of an eye. But now, an almost familiar presence lurked in the corners of the hall. He tried to banish the memory, reminding himself that tonight was about celebrating his engagement. Still, he found himself scanning faces, searching. Why was his heart pounding? Why did he feel as though she was near? The quartet's music reached a soft crescendo, and Ambrose smiled politely, rejoining the conversation with his old friend Arthur Kingsley. Arthur was congratulating him on the engagement, extolling Juliana's virtues. "She'll make a fine companion," Arthur said. "Much better suited to this world. Less complicated," he added, sipping his champagne. The word stung Ambrose, who tried not to show it. He glanced at the extravagant ring on Juliana's finger from across the room, hoping the choice he made was the right one. Juliana eventually returned to Ambrose's side, linking her arm through his. She leaned in, whispering, "Everything is so beautiful. But you seem tense." He feigned a relaxed smile. "Just the usual nerves of hosting," he lied. "Have you enjoyed meeting everyone?" She nodded, but he could see curiosity flickering in her gaze. Something told him she had encountered a mystery. Yet she said nothing more, choosing to maintain decorum. The couple circulated the hall, accepting well wishes and compliments. Soon the staff announced that dinner would be served, and the guests began to move toward the elegantly arranged dining tables. In the kitchen, Genevieve was orchestrating the plating of a 6-course feast. Her staff worked with synchronized precision. She peeked through the swinging door that led to the dining room, catching a glimpse of Ambrose from behind. He stood at the head of a table with Juliana at his side. Their body language exuded comfort unity. The ring on Juliana's finger gleamed, a symbol of a promise that was never hers to keep. Genevieve felt a pang of jealousy, quickly followed by a flood of guilt. She had no claim to him anymore, not after the divorce. But more than that, the secrecy about the triplets weighed heavily on her. She thought back to the day she discovered she was pregnant. It happened shortly after their last argument, just as they were finalizing divorce papers. She had been in such emotional turmoil that she traveled home to see her mother in Montreal, only to faint in her old bedroom. A doctor's visit revealed the astounding truth: she wasn't just pregnant. She was carrying triplets. Fear, confusion, and a strange glimmer of hope filled her. But by then she believed Ambrose was done with her. If he hadn't wanted her around, would he want 3 children, tying him to a marriage he clearly regretted? As dinner was underway, the servers glided in carefully, placing the entrees in front of each guest. The chatter that had filled the hall quieted as everyone admired the artistic presentations of pan-seared duck butter-poached lobster and roasted seasonal vegetables. Juliana raised her glass, proposing a toast to family friends and the future. Ambrose nodded along, though his eyes occasionally darted to the entry leading back to the kitchen. Midway through the meal, a messenger arrived at the estate, an unexpected visitor. One of the staff informed Genevieve that a package marked urgent was delivered for her. Worried it might be about her children. Genevieve hurried to the side entrance. Outside stood a courier holding an envelope. Inside was a note from their nanny Alicia, explaining that Darian had a mild fever. It wasn't serious, but Alicia wanted to keep Genevieve informed. Waves of maternal concern washed over her. She yearned to rush home, but she was bound by the biggest event of her catering career. The mother in her prayed that her child would be all right, that Alicia would handle everything. The businesswoman in her resolved to finish the evening and see her children as soon as she could. Genevieve tucked the note into her pocket, exhaling shakily, then returned to the fray. Back in the dining hall, the staff brought out the next course, a delicate sorbet to cleanse the palate. Ambrose took a spoonful and froze mid-taste. A subtle lingering flavor brought him crashing into his memories. It was lavender and honey. Genevieve's signature combination, something she had once devised during her culinary internship. He stared down at the dish, his heart hammering. Could it be a coincidence? His gaze snapped toward the kitchen's door. He nudged his friend, Matteo Donovan, a business partner who had known him for years. "Do you know who the caterer is?" Ambrose asked, fighting to keep his voice calm. Matteo shrugged. "Your fiancé chose them, I believe. Juliana mentioned it was some exclusive new caterer with rave reviews." Why, Ambrose stared at his sorbet, recollecting the exact day Genevieve had meticulously crafted the lavender-honey fusion. No reason, he muttered, but the tension in his face betrayed him. The music played on, forks clinked against plates, and the hum of conversation continued. Yet all Ambrose could focus on was the possibility that Genevieve was somewhere in this house, determined to either confirm his suspicions or put them to rest. Ambrose excused himself under the pretense of checking on the staff. He slipped away from the table, ignoring the puzzled looks from Juliana and some of his guests. As he approached the kitchen, the scent of fresh herbs, roasted meats, and exotic spices grew stronger. He paused in the corridor outside, inhaling sharply. He recalled the many times he and Genevieve had cooked together, her passion for flavor, the way her laughter would resonate whenever they succeeded in creating something new. Slowly, he pushed open the door. Inside was a controlled chaos, cooks hunched over cutting boards, steam rising from pot servers assembling trays of dessert. Then he saw her. Genevieve stood at the center, delegating tasks, swirling sauce onto plates with the precision of an artist. The world blurred at the edges for Ambrose. It was as though time had folded in on itself. She was older, more poised, her features sharpened by life's challenges. But she was unmistakably his Genevieve. He hovered in the doorway, unsure if he should speak or retreat. The tension snapping within him caught someone's attention. A sous chef called out, "Chef, is everything all right?" Turning. Genevieve's gaze landed on Ambrose. She froze a plate in her hand, her eyes wide, shock etched into every line of her face. For a moment, neither of them moved. The bustling kitchen seemed to fade into silence. Staff turned curious eyes toward the pair, but both Ambrose and Genevieve were too stunned to speak. Finally, Ambrose took a tentative step forward. "Genevieve," he said, his voice cracking. All the rehearsed lines he might have imagined someday saying to her evaporated, leaving him raw and exposed. Genevieve set the plate down, slowly swallowing hard. "Ambrose," she whispered. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes darting around, acutely aware of their captive audience. "Could we talk somewhere private?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. She stood rigid for a moment, her mind torn between refusing and agreeing. But this was his home, after all, and she recognized that no explanation she gave would satisfy him or her staff if she kept refusing to speak to him. Finally, she nodded. "You can use the break room at the end of the corridor," she told one of her sous chefs. Then she turned to Ambrose. "Let's go." The two walked in silence down a narrow hallway. At the break room's threshold, Genevieve paused before opening the door. Her heart felt like it was going to leap out of her chest. With one final deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside, Ambrose following closely behind. The break room was modest, a small space with a round table, a few chairs, and a kitchenette. Genevieve closed the door, and they stood facing each other, the tension thick enough to taste. Ambrose was the first to speak. "You're the caterer." The question sounded ridiculous even to him, but it was all he could muster. She nodded. "I had no idea this was your event when I took the booking," she said, breath trembling. "If I had known—" He tried to swallow the lump in his throat. "If you had known, you wouldn't have taken it." She hesitated, then replied, "No, I wouldn't. But I've built my business from nothing, and my team depends on me. I couldn't just withdraw once it was set. And it's the biggest job we've had in months." Ambrose sank into a chair, running a hand over his face. "I can't believe it." He lifted his gaze to meet hers. Why didn't you ever contact me?" "After you left, I tried to find you. Your number changed, you moved. You vanished." She stiffened. "You were the one who let me go," she said, her voice tinged with anger. Your family never accepted me. And you were so consumed with your inheritance, your business, that I felt invisible. Ambrose pressed his lips together. A wave of regret rose inside him. I tried to fix things, he managed. I just didn't know how. I didn't want to lose you. Well, you did, she responded, crossing her arms. And I moved on. Ambrose let out a ragged breath, noting the defensive set of her shoulders. His eyes searched hers, longing to find a hint of the love they once shared. But the moment was cut short when a soft knock sounded at the door. One of the cooks poked his head in. "Chef, they need you back in the kitchen for dessert service." Genevieve nodded, dismissing him. "I'll be there in a moment. I'm engaged now," Ambrose said softly, as if trying to apologize. "Juliana Carlisle." Her jaw clenched at the name. "So I gathered," she replied. "Congratulations." There was a sharp edge to her tone. Without another word, she opened the door and returned to the corridor, leaving Ambrose to grapple with the storm of emotions inside him. Ambrose emerged from the break room in a daze, stumbling back into the grand hall where dessert was being served. His guests cast curious glances at him, noting the unsettled expression on his face. Juliana, in particular, approached him with concern. She touched his arm lightly. "Are you feeling all right? You look pale." He forced a smile. "Just a bit of a headache," he lied. "I'll be fine." Across the room, Genevieve's staff delivered ornate plates of chocolate soufflé, topped with a delicate raspberry coulis. Conversations resumed, but Ambrose felt as though he were trapped behind a glass wall, isolated with his racing thoughts. Every bite he took tasted like regret. Meanwhile, Genevieve remained in the kitchen, leaning against a counter to steady herself. She had dreamt of how she might react if she ever saw him again, but those fantasies were nothing like this cold, harsh reality. How was she supposed to focus on running the last course of the dinner when her mind was drowning in memories and unresolved pain? She couldn't tell him about the children. Not now. Not in the middle of his engagement dinner. The revelation would be catastrophic, destructive for everyone involved, especially the children. Yet a small voice inside her whispered that he deserved to know. That they deserved to know their father. But how Juliana tried her best to engage in conversations, but her focus kept drifting back to Ambrose. Something about his sudden disappearance to the kitchen, followed by his tense demeanor upon return, set off alarm bells in her mind. A subtle urgency compelled her to find out what had happened. When Ambrose excused himself again this time to make a phone call, she decided to do some investigating of her own. Slipping away from the table, she made her way toward the kitchen once more. The staff was busy with final cleanup, but she spotted a woman in the corner, removing her chef's hat and wiping her brow. Recognition lit within Juliana. This was the same woman she had met in the corridor earlier. Genevieve. Juliana approached gently, though her steps were decisive. "Genevieve Wright?" she asked. "I just wanted to say how marvelous everything was tonight. The dishes were exquisite." Genevieve forced a smile, trying to steady her voice. "Thank you, Ms. Carlisle. I appreciate that." Juliana tilted her head. "I can't help but feel there's something familiar about you." "Have we met before?" Genevieve stiffened. "I don't think so." She lied politely. "I primarily work in the kitchen, behind the scenes." Juliana studied her eyes, narrowing. She hesitated, then said, "You're sure?" There was a moment of tense silence. Before Genevieve could formulate a response, they were interrupted by another staff member asking for the chef's input on leftover dessert plating. Juliana took the opportunity to slip back into the crowd, but a growing sense of unease accompanied her. Clearly something was being hidden from her. When dinner ended, Ambrose escorted Juliana to a private lounge area where brandy and coffee were being served to a smaller circle of close friends and family. The rest of the guests mingled or wandered out to the gardens. The warm glow of the setting sun filtered through the glass doors, painting the room in soft oranges and pinks. Arthur Kingsley approached Ambrose once again, swirling a glass of brandy. "Wonderful event," he drawled. "Though you vanished for a bit, my friend. Anything you want to share?" Ambrose stiffened, forcing a laugh. "Just dealing with a small kitchen issue," he said, deflecting. "You know how these events can be." Arthur smirked. "Indeed," he replied, his voice dripping with subtle suspicion. He never had liked the Rutherford family's tendency to keep secrets, and he was sharp enough to know when one was afloat. As the evening wound down, the staff began clearing plates and packing up. Genevieve told her team to load everything discreetly tiptoeing around to avoid disturbing the lingering guests. All she wanted was to leave this estate behind and never come back. But fate had one more moment of drama in store. Juliana, still unsettled, found herself wandering into a side hallway once more. She was surprised to see an older maid, Harriet, who had been with the Rutherford family for decades. Juliana stopped, offering a kind smile. "Good evening, Harriet. I believe that's your name." Harriet curtsied slightly. "Yes, ma'am. How may I help you?" "I just wanted to thank you for all your hard work." "Everything has been wonderful tonight," Juliana said. Then, sensing Harriet's warm, maternal nature, she took a leap of curiosity. "If you don't mind me asking, have you been here long?" Harriet smiled fondly. "Oh, quite long, miss. I served Mr. Ambrose's parents, rest their souls. I've seen a great many things in this house." Juliana decided to probe further. "Then perhaps you might recall if Ambrose was ever married before." Harriet's face tightened, the corners of her mouth turning down. She lowered her gaze, fidgeting with her apron. "He was miss, a lovely young lady. But they parted ways." Juliana's heartbeat quickened. "Might I ask her name? I know it's in the past, but I'm curious about anything that might help me understand Ambrose better." Harriet hesitated, then said quietly, "Her name was Genevieve. Genevieve Leclerc. She was a chef, you see, from a modest background. She had a beautiful heart, but there were complications. The family didn't fully accept her." Harriet looked up, eyes brimming with sympathy. She left abruptly. It was a difficult time for both of them. The blood drained from Juliana's face. She remembered the encounter in the corridor, Genevieve the caterer, and Ambrose disappearing to the kitchen. The puzzle pieces snapped into place with a terrifying clarity. Juliana forced a smile. "Thank you, Harriet. I appreciate your honesty." She walked away, heart pounding. The woman behind tonight's incredible meal was Ambrose's ex-wife, and judging by the tension she'd sensed, there were wounds that never fully healed. Before Genevieve could slip out of the estate, she found herself cornered by Ambrose, once more this time, in the narrow passage leading to the loading dock. He looked both determined and conflicted, his eyes pleading. "Genevieve, wait." She clutched a box of utensils, refusing to meet his gaze. "I have to go. The event's over, and I'm done here. Please, just a minute," he insisted. "Why didn't you tell me you started your own catering company? Why did you vanish without a trace?" Her face hardened. What difference would it have made? "It's my life, Ambrose. I owed you nothing after our divorce." He stepped closer, pain lacing his voice. "We were never truly divorced in our hearts. You know that." The words spilled out before he could catch them. But the moment they hung in the air, He realized how complicated the truth was. Genevieve's eyes flashed. "That's where you're wrong. We signed the papers. It's done. You have your new life, your new fiancé. Enjoy it." Tears threatened to break through her composure, but she refused to let them. Instead, she pushed past him. He reached for her arm, but she pulled free, turning the corner. The clatter of her catering crates followed her as she fled, leaving Ambrose standing alone in that dimly lit corridor, his entire world spinning. Juliana had witnessed enough to understand the core of the situation. She entered the corridor just as Genevieve disappeared around the bend. Seeing Ambrose standing there distraught, Juliana approached. He locked eyes with her guilt flooding his face. "Juliana." She held up a trembling hand, her eyes hard. "You knew the caterer was your ex-wife and you said nothing." His throat bobbed. "I only found out tonight. I swear I had no idea she was handling this event." Juliana's fury ignited her voice, dropping to a hiss. "That's not what concerns me. It's the way you looked at her. The secrets you've kept. If there was something unresolved, you should have told me before you proposed." Ambrose tried to explain, but words failed him. He realized how badly he had managed the situation. "I didn't expect her to come back into my life," he whispered. "There's a history, but I thought it was over." Juliana's expression revealed a deep hurt. "History doesn't look over to me." She turned on her heel and marched away. Ambrose stood there watching her go, knowing the foundation of trust between them was crumbling. Hours later, Genevieve finally arrived at her modest home, a far cry from the Rutherford mansion. She slipped off her shoes and rushed into the children's bedroom. Alicia was there, reading a story to Darian and Marcus, while Lila was already dozing off. The boys brightened at seeing their mother, though Darian's face was flushed with the remnants of a fever. "How is he?" Genevieve asked softly, pressing her hand to Darian's forehead. Alicia smiled. "Better. The fever's coming down. He just needs rest." Genevieve's heart squeezed with relief. She thanked Alicia, who gathered her things to leave for the night. Once she was gone, Genevieve settled on the edge of the bed. Darian cuddled closer, his small hand gripping hers. Marcus, ever curious, asked, "Mummy, did you cook nice food for the big, fancy party?" She mustered a smile. "Yes, sweetie. It was a big night. Lots of people liked the food." "Are they nice people?" Darian mumbled sleepily. Genevieve swallowed, remembering Ambrose, Juliana, and all the conflict. "Some of them are," she said gently. "Others, we'll see." She sang a lullaby in French, the language of her childhood, and watched her children drift off to sleep. A pang of longing for a different life twisted in her gut. She envisioned Ambrose with the children. Would he read them? Bedtime stories share in their laughter. Watch them grow. But reality crashed back with brutal force. Ambrose was engaged to another woman, his life 1,000 miles from her own. She stroked Darian's hair, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. In their innocent faces, she saw the promise of a better tomorrow. But was that tomorrow big enough to hold the truth of who their father was? After Juliana left him in the corridor, Ambrose wandered the estate aimlessly. Eventually, he retreated to his private study, where he poured himself a stiff drink. He stared at the portrait of his parents hanging on the wall. They had always emphasized the importance of preserving the family legacy, urging him to marry someone who fit their status. Genevieve had never stood a chance against their disapproval, and Ambrose himself had been too weak to stand by her unconditionally, too consumed with the demands of his lineage. He downed the drink, the liquor burning his throat. Memories flashed through his mind, a vision of Genevieve laughing as they danced barefoot in the garden, the whisper of her voice when she told him she would always be there for him, no matter what. Lies all undone. His phone buzzed, and he saw Juliana's name on the screen, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. He felt unworthy of her, confused by his own heart, and haunted by the re-emergence of Genevieve. He recalled how Harriet, the loyal maid, had been the one who discovered Genevieve's packed suitcases the day she left. Harriet had told him, "She's a good woman, Mr. Ambrose. If she's leaving, it must be for a reason." He hadn't believed it at the time, but now he realized how deeply he had failed her. Juliana returned to her family's penthouse in Manhattan, slipping off her heels and pacing across the living room. Her mind buzzed with 1,000 questions. She recalled the sadness in Genevieve's eyes, the tension between her and Ambrose. It wasn't mere coincidence that Genevieve ended up catering this dinner. Fate, or some cosmic irony, had thrust them together. She debated whether to confront Ambrose directly, but the raw look on his face earlier suggested that he himself was grappling with the shock of seeing Genevieve again. Was there more to the story than he had shared? The family he rarely spoke of, the ex-wife who vanished, did they still love each other? Nerves churned in Juliana's stomach. She thought about her own motivations for marrying Ambrose. Love, yes, she cared for him, but also a desire for social standing and philanthropic clout. Did she truly love him enough to endure these revelations? Or would it be best to walk away now, preserving her own dignity? The next morning, Harriet approached Ambrose cautiously while he was sipping coffee in the estate's breakfast nook. He was unshaven, bleary-eyed, and wore the same clothes as the night before. Harriet set down a platter of pastries, her brow creasing in concern. "Mr. Ambrose," she began softly, "I couldn't help but notice how distressed you were last night. Is there anything you need?" He shook his head. "I'll be fine, Harriet." She hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "I remember Mrs. Genevieve, Miss Leclerc," she corrected. "She had a light in her. It dimmed when she realized your parents would never accept her. I saw how it hurt both of you." Ambrose stared at the table, fiddling with his coffee cup. "I just keep replaying everything, trying to figure out how it all went so wrong." Harriet bowed her head. "Sometimes when people are in pain, they do things they regret. If you still care for her, perhaps it's not too late to talk." He sighed. "She's gone, Harriet. She left with her crew. I don't know where she lives." Then a sudden thought struck him: the catering company. He could track her down through that. Part of him was terrified by the idea, but a stronger part knew he had to see her again, if only for closure. Over the next few days, Ambrose threw himself into searching for Genevieve's catering service. He had his assistant Mark comb through business directories and phone listings. Finally, they located an address in Brooklyn tied to the name Leclerc Gastronomy. Without telling anyone, not even Juliana Ambrose decided to pay a visit. He arrived in a sleek car, stepping out onto a modest street lined with local shops and cafes. The building that housed Leclerc Gastronomy was unassuming, a simple storefront with a display window showcasing photos of catered events and a small sign with the company name. Ambrose's pulse quickened as he pushed open the door. Inside, he found a receptionist who greeted him politely. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for Genevieve Leclerc," he said, trying to keep his tone neutral. "She's out at a tasting event right now," the receptionist replied. "Do you have an appointment?" Ambrose hesitated. "No, but I'd like to make one. It's, personal business. My name is Ambrose Rutherford." The receptionist's eyes flickered with recognition of the Rutherford name. "I'll let her know you stopped by." She took his information, and he left a mixture of relief and anxiety coursing through him. He knew she would not be pleased to see him intruding on her professional turf, but he needed answers. That evening, Genevieve returned to the catering office. The receptionist passed along Ambrose's message. Genevieve's heart lurched. She'd hoped the event at the Rutherford estate would be the last time she ever had to see him. Now he was seeking her out, presumably for closure or an apology. She dreaded the confrontation, but realized she couldn't avoid him forever. She decided to schedule a meeting, feeling both dread and curiosity gnawing at her. What exactly did he want? To simply rehash old wounds? Or did he sense that she was hiding something bigger? Before the meeting date arrived, Ambrose took a more direct approach, returning to the office unannounced. Through the glass door, he spotted Genevieve at her desk reviewing menus. She looked tired, but determined, her hair swept up in a practical bun. A softness overcame his features. She was still the woman he once loved, the woman who had taught him that life was more than board meetings and social obligations. Genevieve felt his gaze and looked up, eyes widening at the sight of him. An electric current flashed between them. With a sigh, she waved him in. He stepped into her small, efficient office, glancing around at the framed photos of lavish banquets, smiling clients and staff. "You've done well," he said, genuinely impressed. She folded her arms, bracing herself. "What are you doing here, Ambrose?" He took a breath. "I just needed to talk. About us, how we ended." She leaned against her desk, trying to project confidence. "It's been nearly 6 years. I'm not sure what good talking will do now." He looked down. "I never got closure. Never understood why you completely vanished." He hesitated, adding in a softer tone, "Did I hurt you so much that you couldn't even face me?" She blinked, tears threatening. "It wasn't about hurting me. It was about living a life you seemed to have no place for. Your world demanded perfection. I couldn't meet that standard, and neither could our marriage." Ambrose's voice cracked. "If there was a chance to make it right, would you have taken it?" She shook her head, recalling how lonely she'd felt, how judged she'd been by his family. "I don't know, Ambrose. Maybe. But it's too late now." A part of her wanted to tell him about the triplets, to release this heavy secret. Yet she saw the shadows under his eyes, the weight he carried from even seeing her again. How could she upend his entire life? Meanwhile, Juliana had not been idle. She had a network of friends and contacts who prided themselves on discretion, and she wanted to know exactly who Genevieve was beyond the gossip. It didn't take long for her to uncover more details. The timeline of Genevieve's brief but intense marriage to Ambrose, the rumors of disapproval from Ambrose's parents, and the abrupt disappearance. Some hush-hush talk hinted that Genevieve might have left with more than a broken heart, but the rumors were conflicting. Determined to confront Ambrose, Juliana drove to the Rutherford estate one evening. She found him alone in the study, staring at old photographs. When he saw her, he rose to greet her, looking both guilty and relieved. "You've been distant," she stated, crossing her arms. "I know you went to see Genevieve. Don't deny it." Ambrose nodded. "I did. I just had to. I had to try to understand. It wasn't fair to you or to me to keep carrying this baggage." Juliana's eyes hardened. "So did you get the answers you needed?" He exhaled. "I'm not sure. But I do know that what we have our engagement needs honesty. I can't marry you if I'm still lying to myself about the past." She pursed her lips. "So you're calling off the wedding?" "I'm just saying, We need more time to work through this. I need clarity, and I don't want to hurt you." His voice trembled with sincerity. Juliana took a step back, anger and hurt warring on her face. "You're putting me on hold because you can't figure out your feelings for your ex-wife." The bitterness in her tone was unmistakable. "It's not like that," he tried to explain. "I just decide." "Ambrose," she demanded, tears gleaming in her eyes. "You either want a future with me, or you want to chase the ghost of a marriage that ended 6 years ago. I won't be a second choice." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Ambrose to wrestle with the magnitude of his decision. Back at Genevieve's home, the triplets sensed their mother's agitation. Their bright, curious eyes watched her pace the living room, phone in hand. She was waiting for a call from a prospective client, but her mind was elsewhere on Ambrose, on the conversation in her office. Marcus, the more introspective child, tugged at her sleeve. "Mummy, are you sad?" She forced a smile, scooping him into a hug. "Just tired, sweetie. Busy day at work." Darian and Lila joined them, looking concerned. Darian asked, "Did something bad happen at the fancy party?" Genevieve kissed their foreheads. "No, darling. Everything went fine. Mummy just ran into someone from her past, and it's made her think a lot." Lila pressed her large eyes, searching Genevieve's face. Genevieve's heart pounded. Should she tell them now at ages 5.5 about their father? She looked at their innocent faces, wishing she had a roadmap for this situation. Ultimately, she just said, "Someone I used to know." It's complicated. They accepted her vague answer for the moment, but she knew their questions would only grow as they got older. And the older they got, the more complicated the truth would become. A week passed in uncertainty. Juliana gave Ambrose the space he requested, but the engagement was in limbo. Genevieve tried to refocus on her catering work. She told herself she didn't need to see Ambrose again. But fate intervened. A philanthropic gala was scheduled at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and both Juliana and Ambrose were invited. Unbeknownst to Genevieve, her catering company was hired by the organizers. So once more, their paths crossed. Genevieve was adjusting a grand display of canapes in the museum's marble foyer when she sensed a pair of eyes on her. Turning, she saw Juliana standing there, elegant in a floor-length gown, her expression guarded. Genevieve's heart pounded. She braced herself for an unpleasant confrontation. Juliana approached, arms crossed. "So it's you again?" Genevieve forced professionalism. "We cater all sorts of events in the city." Juliana studied her for a long moment. Then, in a surprising turn, she said quietly, "I need to talk to you. Please. Somewhere private." Genevieve frowned but nodded. She led Juliana to a small, tucked-away alcove near the staff corridor. The distant hum of classical music and polite conversation floated through the air. Juliana wasted no time. "You still love him," she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "Don't you?" Genevieve tensed. "That's irrelevant. We have our history, but he's engaged to you. Is he?" Juliana's eyes flickered with pain. "He told me he needed space to figure things out. But I know he's not over you." Genevieve lowered her gaze, tears threatening to spill. "You're the one he chose. My time with him was years ago." Juliana pressed her lips together. "But you vanished, and rumor has it you took something with you. Or someone. Is there?" She trailed off, suspecting a hidden child, though she hadn't expected triplets. Genevieve's breath caught in her throat. She clenched her jaw, refusing to confirm or deny. She was not about to reveal the triplets in a museum corridor. "You have no right to pry," she whispered sharply. Juliana's tone hardened. "I'm trying to figure out whether I'm marrying a man who has a child or children he doesn't even know about. Do you realize how devastating that would be for everyone if this came out later?" Genevieve blinked back tears. "It's not your business. Whatever happened between Ambrose and me ended long ago." "It is my business," Juliana retorted, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "I'm the one wearing his ring, and if there are children involved, that changes everything." Genevieve hesitated, then swallowed hard. "I can't talk about this now." She turned and rushed away, leaving Juliana standing there more convinced than ever that Genevieve was hiding a life-altering secret. Not long after this tense exchange, Genevieve was gathering her supplies in a secluded area when Ambrose appeared. She tried to sidestep him, but he gently caught her arm. "Genevieve, please. We can't keep running into each other like this without talking." She stared at him, tears of frustration welling. "You want to talk? Fine." She took a deep breath, preparing to release the secret she had guarded for years. In a shaky voice, she said, "There's something you need to know. After I left, I found out I was pregnant." Ambrose's eyes widened, shock flooding his features. "Pregnant with my child?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Children. Triplets, actually. 2 boys and a girl." She watched disbelief mix with sorrow on his face. "They're 5 years old, almost 6. She added, her voice catching. "I didn't tell you because I thought you wouldn't want them, or me." Ambrose pressed a hand to his temple, struggling to process the revelation. "Triplets," he repeated, his voice trembling. "How could you think I wouldn't want my own children?" His reaction burst the dam of her composure. "Because you let me walk away. You didn't fight for me. Your parents made it clear I was unworthy. I thought you'd consider them a burden." He shook his head, tears in his eyes. "I was a fool. I never stopped loving you, and I would have." He inhaled shakily. "I should have found you." Suddenly they realized they weren't alone. Juliana stood at the edge of the corridor, having overheard the conversation. Her face was pale as she absorbed the magnitude of the truth. "Triplets," she whispered, voice shaking with betrayal and sorrow. Genevieve's head dropped, guilt flooding her. Ambrose turned to Juliana, speechless. The hush that followed was deafening. The rest of the gala night passed in a blur. Genevieve left her heart pounding, half dreading Ambrose's next move. Juliana confronted Ambrose again, tears staining her cheeks. "You have children you never knew about," she whispered. "Where does that leave us?" Ambrose gently took her hands. "I'm sorry, Juliana. I never intended to hurt you. But those children are mine. I can't abandon them now that I know they exist." Juliana stared at him for a long moment, then exhaled a shaky breath. "You need to do what's right, for them and for yourself. If that means we're done, then I suppose this is goodbye." The next morning, Ambrose asked Harriet to accompany him on a drive to Genevieve's Brooklyn address. He needed to meet his children. Harriet, who had always served as a calming presence, agreed. The tension in the car was palpable as they navigated the busy city streets. When they arrived at the modest home, Ambrose felt his heart thundering in his chest. He climbed the porch steps, Harriet at his side. Genevieve opened the door, her expression guarded. Standing behind her, were three curious faces each, with features reminiscent of Ambrose, especially Darian, whose stormy grey eyes mirrored his father's. Ambrose knelt, tears streaming down his face. "Hello," he whispered, voice trembling. I'm Ambrose." The children gazed at him, unsure but intrigued. Finally, Marcus stepped forward, offering a small hand. "Are you our daddy?" he asked bluntly. Ambrose let out a ragged breath. He took the tiny hand in his, nodding. "Yes. Yes, I am." And in that moment, the future was irrevocably changed. A father stood before his children for the first time, and a mother held her breath, wondering if a bridge could be built over all the lost years. This story has taken us through hidden truths, broken promises, and the courage it takes to face the past. Ambrose, once poised to marry into elite society again, discovered an unbreakable bond, his triplets concealed by years of heartache. Genevieve, determined to shield herself and her children, found strength in her culinary dreams and the simple life she built outside mansion walls. And Juliana, torn between anger and empathy, ultimately chose her own path of self-respect. What will become of Ambrose and Genevieve? Now that the truth is out, can the love they lost be rekindled? Or are they fated to remain strangers, sharing only the gift of children? Only time will reveal how these three hearts and three little ones will heal. If you've been captivated by this emotional journey, be sure to like the video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping real-life drama fiction. See you next time.